Not everyone, however, in business agrees that a carbon price and a trading scheme are best for the economy. A short time ago, I was joined by Peter Anderson, the Chief Executive of the largest employer representative group, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or ACCI. Peter Anderson, welcome to Lateline Business.
Thank you, Tiki.
Well, we've got an election in the wind, a new leader, a smaller Australia, policies coming out on the trot, if not on the run. What's the biggest issue for business and employers in this election?
The real issue is to have political leadership that looks to the economic horizon, that can lift a vision from the day-to-day challenges and issues we have and craft a broad, long-term economic plan for Australia's prosperity. And that takes some leadership, and it also takes some good, sensible policy thinking, and it's certainly not without a lot of hard reform effort attached to it.
Well, Prime Minister Gillard is tackling a couple of those long-term issues. The Climate Institute chief today said power prices are going to go up because we don't have a carbon price in this country and because we don't have action on climate. He and others are calling for a carbon price and an ETS. Is that what you'd like?
Look, we've had momentous political changes in Australia in the past month, but one thing that the change from Kevin Rudd to Julia Gillard has not been able to change is the fact that the Copenhagen conference last December failed to reach a global consensus on international action on climate change. And that means something for a country like Australia. It means that we should be recalibrating our approach to take into account those global realities. If we went down the path of an emissions trading scheme right now, or a carbon tax for that matter, it would be a big stick which we would be hitting our own economy with, our own community with, for very little gain. What we need are policies which are more carrot than stick in this period whilst we're waiting for an international consensus to emerge.
So, in fact, if the Prime Minister announced a couple of helpful direct action goals and carrots, as you say, and talked about a carbon price but not yet, that might suit you very well.
Well, it's very important that we don't get ahead of ourselves here. We saw last year that big ideas can come crashing down because all of the big ideas to deal with climate change, which are based around targets and assumptions, ultimately expose Australia greatly if other countries don't pick up a fair share of the heavy lifting as well.
Just moving to the new deal on the mining tax, the government says the deal only shaves off $1.5 billion on budget numbers. Analyst reports are now coming through questioning that view. Where do you sit on this?
Well, we've had a look at the figures, and we have to at this stage rely on what government through Treasury is saying. There obviously are some assumptions about commodity prices being built into and what the government says will still be its revenue stream. The important issue here is to recognise that there is still a heavy new tax which is being placed on the resources industry, and only a proportion of that is being returned to the economy through tax relief and tax reform. The government has a big tax reform agenda which it still is yet to grasp. It needs to be seized, a tax reform agenda which adds a great deal of incentive and reward for entrepreneurship in Australia, is part of building that economic vision, part of lifting our sights to the economic horizon and taking the opportunities of the future, which are great, but which require hard reform to occur.
Do you believe that the funds raised from this new mining tax will indeed be funding the rise in the superannuation guarantee to 12%, or do you think employers might end up funding this?
Well, it's not a question of even what I think. It's a question of what are the facts. And the facts are that the mining tax is not going to fund an increase in superannuation from 9% to 12%. The government is going to legislate that employers in Australia, about 1 million employers, pay that increase in superannuation. It's a 33% increase in what employers are currently paying. It's an enormous hit on the employer community of Australia. It was not recommended by the Henry Review. It was put in place by the government without consultation, and what the government now needs to do is to sit down with the employer community of Australia and work out a way in which that can be funded, because at the moment the government is simply saying you, the employers of Australia, are progressively over the next decade going to be doing almost all the heavy lifting on retirement incomes in this country, and that's a very unbalanced approach.
Moving to industrial relations, are you expecting the government to run a strong scare campaign on work choices?
Well, I think the government will point to the changes it's made, but equally what the business community is going to do is to point to the need for our industrial relations system to maintain both the principles of fairness and the safety net that is generally accepted in the community as necessary, but also the necessary flexibility for an economy as diverse as Australia's. And just in the course of the past couple of days, we've seen an example where one of our new industrial relations rules in the retail industry has had some negative impacts for after-school employment of young people in country Victoria. That's undesirable. We need to build some flexibility into our rules so those silly outcomes don't occur, so those errors are corrected, and the government needs not only to point to what it's done, but to also make sure that it has an open mind to making changes in the future if it is re-elected.
There are other concerns raised by the Australians today on Julia Gillard's Fair Work Act, which impact coastal shipping and particularly the movement of freight under international flags. Is this a concern? Do you agree with people like Toll's Paul Little?
Oh, I do, because there's no doubt that even where changes are merited, where those changes bring about costs, then those costs flow through. In this case, costs of shipping passed on to business consumers and the public at large. What we need to do is to pick up the principle the government said, and that is that enterprise bargaining involving productivity trade-offs will be at the heart of the industrial relations system. Wherever costs occur, they should be subject to offsetting productivity changes, and we haven't yet seen a lot of that coming out of the industrial relations system.
Peter Anderson, thank you for talking to Late Line Business.
Thanks very much, Tiggy.